Imagine a place where neighbors once shared meals, celebrated weddings, and raised their children side by side, only to find themselves on opposite sides of a battlefield within a few short years. This is the story of Yugoslavia, a nation whose unity unraveled into one of the most tragic chapters in modern European history. The origins of the conflict in Yugoslavia can be traced back to a complex mix of historical, political, and ethnic factors that had been simmering for decades. Yugoslavia was a multi-ethnic federation formed after World War I and restructured after World War II under the leadership of Josip Broz Tito. It brought together 6 republics: Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, Montenegro, and Macedonia, along with 2 autonomous provinces within Serbia, Vojvodina and Kosovo. For much of Tito's rule, unity was maintained through a strong central government, a balance of power among the ethnic groups, and suppression of nationalist sentiments. However, after Tito's death in 1980, the absence of his unifying influence created a vacuum in leadership. Economic decline, rising unemployment, and inflation added to public dissatisfaction, while political leaders began to appeal to nationalist ideologies to strengthen their own positions. Historical grievances from earlier periods, including memories of World War II atrocities, resurfaced and fueled mistrust among different ethnic groups. The collapse of communism in Eastern Europe in the late 1980s also played a major role, as republics within Yugoslavia began demanding more autonomy or outright independence. Serbia, under Slobodan Milosevic, sought to maintain centralized control, which was viewed as a threat by other republics. The tension between those wanting to preserve a united Yugoslavia and those seeking independence created deep divisions. These divisions were not just political but also cultural and religious, with differences between Catholic Croats, Orthodox Serbs, and Muslim Bosniaks becoming sources of conflict. By the early 1990s, the fragile unity that had once defined Yugoslavia had eroded, setting the stage for a series of violent confrontations that would lead to its eventual breakup. The unresolved disputes and mistrust among the republics made peaceful solutions increasingly difficult to achieve. In 1991, the tensions within Yugoslavia reached a breaking point when Slovenia and Croatia declared their independence, challenging the authority of the federal government and the Yugoslav People's Army, JNA. Slovenia's move toward independence was relatively swift and driven by its strong economy, distinct cultural identity, and growing sentiment that it could thrive better outside the federation. On June 25, 1991, Slovenia officially proclaimed independence, which immediately prompted a military response from the JNA. This confrontation, known as the 10-Day War, was short but intense. Slovenian forces, better organized on home territory, managed to resist effectively, and a negotiated settlement soon led to the withdrawal of JNA troops, allowing Slovenia to move forward largely unscathed compared to the other republics. Croatia's path, however, was far bloodier. Croatia also declared independence on June 25, 1991, but faced significant internal challenges, as large populations of ethnic Serbs lived within its borders. These Serb communities, with support from the JNA and Serbian leadership, opposed Croatian independence, fearing marginalization and loss of rights. Armed conflict quickly erupted, escalating into a protracted war marked by heavy fighting, sieges, and widespread destruction. Cities like Vukovar became symbols of resistance, but also of the immense human cost. The Croatian War of Independence drew in paramilitary groups, involved ethnic cleansing, and resulted in large-scale displacement of civilians. International recognition of Slovenia and Croatia came gradually, with the European community and other nations officially acknowledging their sovereignty in early 1992. However, for Croatia, independence was achieved only after years of conflict and significant losses. These 2 declarations of independence were pivotal moments that not only signaled the unraveling of Yugoslavia, but also set a precedent for other republics to follow, deepening the fragmentation of the federation and pushing the region further into a cycle of war and division. The Bosnian War, which lasted from 1992 to 1995, was one of the most brutal and complex conflicts in the breakup of Yugoslavia. It began after Bosnia and Herzegovina declared independence in March 1992, a move supported mainly by Bosniaks, Bosnian Muslims, and Croats but opposed by many Bosnian Serbs. The Serb population, backed by the Yugoslav People's Army and later by the Army of Republika Srpska under Radovan Karadzic, sought to create their own Serb-controlled territories and maintain ties with Serbia. The war quickly escalated into a multi-sided conflict involving Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs, each with their own military forces and political agendas. Ethnic tensions fueled violence, and the conflict became infamous for acts of ethnic cleansing, mass killings, and systematic atrocities against civilians. The siege of Sarajevo, which lasted nearly 4 years, became a symbol of the war's cruelty, with residents enduring constant shelling, sniper fire, and severe shortages of food and medicine. Another horrific event was the 1995 Srebrenica massacre, where over 8,000 Bosniak men and boys were killed by Bosnian Serb forces, later ruled as genocide by international courts. International efforts to stop the fighting were slow and often ineffective, with United Nations peacekeeping forces struggling to protect designated, safe areas. NATO eventually intervened with airstrikes against Bosnian Serb positions in 1995, shifting the balance of power and pushing parties toward negotiation. The war ended with the signing of the Dayton Peace Agreement in December 1995, which recognized Bosnia and Herzegovina as a single state composed of 2 entities, the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Republika Srpska. The conflict left deep political, social, and psychological scars, with over 100,000 people killed and millions displaced, making it one of the most devastating wars in Europe since World War II. The NATO intervention in Kosovo in 1999 was the culmination of escalating tensions between ethnic Albanians, who made up the majority of Kosovo's population, and the Serbian government led by Slobodan Milosevic. Kosovo, an autonomous province within Serbia, had long been a flashpoint for nationalist tensions. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Serbia revoked much of Kosovo's autonomy, fueling resentment among Albanians. By the mid-1990s, the Kosovo Liberation Army, KLA, emerged, advocating for independence and engaging in armed resistance against Serbian forces. The conflict intensified in 1998, with Serbian military and police launching operations that targeted not only KLA fighters but also civilians, leading to widespread human rights abuses, massacres, and mass displacement. Reports of atrocities, such as the Rakic massacre in January 1999, drew international condemnation. Diplomatic efforts, including the Rambouillet peace talks, failed to reach an agreement, as Serbia rejected terms that included the presence of NATO troops in Kosovo. In March 1999, NATO launched an aerial bombing campaign against Serbian military targets, infrastructure, and supply lines, marking the first time the alliance had used force without explicit UN Security Council approval. The campaign lasted 78 days, with Serbian forces intensifying their crackdown during the bombings, resulting in further displacement of hundreds of thousands of Kosovars. Under mounting military pressure and international isolation, Milosevic agreed in June 1999 to withdraw Serbian forces from Kosovo, allowing NATO-led peacekeepers, KFOR, to enter and administer the province alongside the United Nations. While the intervention ended large-scale violence, it left lingering tensions between Serbs and Albanians, and Kosovo's final political status remained unresolved for years, culminating in its 2008 declaration of independence, which Serbia still does not recognize. The operation remains a subject of debate, praised by some as a humanitarian necessity and criticized by others as a violation of international law. The wars in the former Yugoslavia created one of the worst humanitarian crises in Europe since World War II, affecting millions across Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, and other regions. As fighting spread through the 1990s, entire communities were uprooted, with civilians often deliberately targeted as part of campaigns of ethnic cleansing. In Bosnia alone, Hundreds of thousands were forced from their homes as armed forces sought to change the ethnic makeup of towns and villages through intimidation, destruction, and violence. Refugee flows spilled across borders into neighboring countries and throughout Europe, overwhelming aid systems. Many families were separated, with loved ones disappearing into detention camps or being killed in massacres. Conditions inside besieged cities like Sarajevo were dire, with shortages of food, clean water, medicine, and electricity lasting for years. Medical care was often inaccessible, and humanitarian convoys were frequently blocked or attacked. The crisis also had a deep psychological impact, with widespread trauma among survivors, especially children who grew up amid violence, loss, and displacement. In Kosovo, the late 1990s saw another surge in refugees, as Serbian military actions against ethnic Albanians forced hundreds of thousands to flee, many in the middle of winter with inadequate shelter or supplies. International aid organizations such as the UNHCR, Red Cross, and Médecins Sans Frontieres worked to provide relief, but the scale of need often outpaced. Available resources. Camps for displaced people became semi-permanent settlements, and rebuilding destroyed homes proved slow and difficult. The wars left not only physical devastation but also generations dealing with grief, fractured communities, and the challenge of reconciling with former enemies. The humanitarian disaster underscored the devastating consequences of political collapse, ethnic nationalism, and failure to resolve disputes through peaceful means. The aftermath of the Yugoslav wars left the region permanently transformed, with a once unified state dissolved into several independent countries: Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Serbia, and later Kosovo, whose independence remains disputed by Serbia and some other nations. The fragmentation was not just political but deeply social and economic. Borders were redrawn, and communities that had lived together for decades were separated by ethnic divisions hardened through years of conflict. Many areas were left in ruins, with infrastructure, housing, and industry destroyed, making post-war recovery slow and uneven. Economies collapsed during the wars, and rebuilding was hindered by corruption, political instability, and the lingering presence of nationalist rhetoric. The legacy of ethnic cleansing and atrocities created deep mistrust among groups, and reconciliation efforts often struggled against competing narratives of the past. International organizations, including the United Nations, NATO, and the European Union, played a significant role in post-war stabilization, deploying peacekeepers, facilitating democratic reforms, and supporting war crimes tribunals such as the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, ICTY, which prosecuted leaders responsible for atrocities. Despite these efforts, political tensions and disputes over borders, minority rights, and historical memory continue to shape the region's politics. Some countries, like Slovenia and Croatia, have integrated into the European Union and NATO, while others remain outside, facing slower economic growth and political challenges. The wars also left lasting demographic changes, with many displaced persons never returning to their pre-war homes, creating ethnically more homogeneous regions. The psychological scars remain profound, with generations still coping with trauma, loss, and the struggle to rebuild trust. The fragmentation of Yugoslavia stands as a complex legacy of both independence gained and unity lost, reshaping the Balkans in ways that continue to influence its future. The story of the Yugoslav wars is one of unity shattered by fear, mistrust, and the pull of competing national identities. From the first declarations of independence in Slovenia and Croatia to the devastation of Bosnia, the humanitarian tragedies, the intervention in Kosovo, and the final fragmentation of the region, the conflicts left deep physical, emotional, and political scars. Entire communities were displaced, countless lives were lost, and the bonds that once tied people together were replaced by borders and divisions. Yet within this history also lies a lesson for the world, that peace, once broken, is difficult to restore, and that the cost of unresolved grievances can span generations. The Balkans today stand as both a reminder of the dangers of division and a testament to the resilience of people who, despite tragedy, continue to rebuild. It is a history that warns against the politics of exclusion and calls for dialogue, empathy, and the courage to seek common ground before differences turn into conflict.